the next session. This next session is the interactive dialogue on healthy land and healthy people. We shall proceed as follows. I'll start with welcome remarks to the honorable participants and distinguished guests. I will also give you a brief introduction to the subject matter. I will very briefly introduce the panel, the panelists. The panelists will be given a maximum of 8 minutes for their discourse, and if time is going to allow, we will allow 4 questions to the panelists. Then I'll call upon ministers and other leaders of the delegation to make their comments. We hope that perhaps we could leave a few minutes towards the end for wrap-up statements. Honorable ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you once again to the interactive dialogue on healthy land, healthy people. I'll be chairing this session. My names are Dr. Dennis Muskuwanchinga. I'm Minister for Water Development, Sanitation, and Environmental Protection in Zambia. My academic background is that I'm an entomologist with a background in ecology. Let me very briefly introduce to you the panelists who are going to make their presentations. We have His Excellency Lorena Aquila Rivero, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of the Republic of Costa Rica. We have Dr. Jami Tosing, Director, the Southeast Asia Office, the International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Diseases. We also have His Excellency Howard Ramsey, the Chair of the Steering Committee of the Global Water Partnership, and also Dr. Ponan Ketra Singh, the Regional Director of the World Health Organization for Southeast Asia region. Distinguished guests, the background to the discussion on healthy land and healthy people is that the United Nations Convention places humans at the center of concerns to combat desertification and to mitigate the effects of drought. The second and third objectives of the UNCCD strategic framework for 2018 and 2030, they aim respectively to improve the living conditions of affected populations and to mitigate, adapt to, and manage the effects of drought in order to enhance resilience of vulnerable populations and ecosystems. To my mind, distinguished guests, the roundtable comes at the right time and covers the right topic. I hope that our discussion provides a boost for policy development in being better prepared to effectively address the widespread global challenges from desertification, land degradation, and drought. Much more specifically, distinguished guests, it is undeniable that land remains an important resource that is critical to human health and well-being. In addition to the ecosystem services and land provides, we derive social, cultural, and spiritual benefits that constitute a crucial life support system for human health and well-being. In light of this, distinguished guests, land resources are pivotal to the sustenance of human life, water and air quality, pollination, regulation of natural hazards and risks, and the general ecosystem health. This invariably means that our very survival, our health, and our entire well-being as humans, and for your bio life, depend on healthy land. However, land resources are under severe pressure due to land degradation aggravated by human activities. The estimation, distinguished participants, is that 32.2 billion people are affected by land degradation worldwide. Unfortunately, our very own unsustainable agricultural and forestry practices, consumption patterns, increasing urbanization, population growth, and the subsequent expansion of crop and grazing lands are posing enormous threats to ecosystem health and our very existence. These threats, distinguished participants, are further heightened by climate change, but also with adverse implications for sustainable development and human well-being. While the UNCCD strategic framework for 2018 to 2030 and the SDG 15 and other international frameworks are committed to land degradation neutrality, restoring degraded land, and reducing drought impacts, understanding the relationship between ecosystem sustainability and health benefits would be an important contribution to decision-making regardless of environmental health management. This includes water, land, food, air, and soil. Thus, ladies and gentlemen, a sustainable and equitable development regarding land and water management would ensure benefits for the health and well-being of all at both the local and global levels. This interactive dialogue session will therefore provide critical insights and policy direction as to how to effectively proceed on the issues including land degradation and the associated impacts on human and ecosystem health. I look forward, ladies and gentlemen, to a fruitful discussion ahead and where we are united in our goal to build a healthy land and healthy people. I will now, ladies and gentlemen, proceed to individually introduce and call upon the speakers. One of these two? Okay. Which one? This one. Okay. His Excellency? Yes. I will briefly introduce Her Excellency Lorena Aguirre Rivero, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of the Republic of Costa Rica. Ms. Lorena Aguirre, ladies and gentlemen, is a global leader passionate about gender equality and sustainable development issues. With over 3 decades of experience integrating social and gender considerations across initiatives and providing strategic contributions to national and international policies and generating knowledge. Until 2018, Ms. Lorena was Global Senior Gender Advisor and Global Director of the Governance and Rights Program of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN. At present, she serves as Vice Minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica. Her Excellency, Ms. Lorena Aguirre Rivero, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Healthland is an essential part of our life support system. Degradation and desertification processes rob the land of its ability to provide valuable services to humanity and are also driving biodiversity loss and climate change. Environmental risk factors such as lack of food and water and soil pollution, lack of sanitation and hygiene, and climate-related diseases result in communicable and non-communicable diseases, malnutrition, disability, morbidity, and mortality. Assessing vulnerability to the risk factor is complex and includes an understanding of existing health status. Populations are not equally vulnerable, and gender inequality is an important factor. Neither are risk equality distributed in time or spatial scale. Yet, the lack of knowledge of gender-differentiated health impacts due to the insufficient collection of sex and age disaggregated data makes it difficult for the public health system to adapt and support human health and well-being of women and girls and boys alike. So let me refer to you why this has happened. It's what we can call the syndrome of the one-size-fits-only man. The documented human history is one big data gap. The lives of mainly white men have been taken to represent those of human overall. When it comes to the lives of the other half of the world, there is often silence. And these silences, these gaps, have consequences. They impact us, women, every day. Sometimes their impact can be minor and irritating, like trying to work on a farm with a shovel trying to grit it, and to fix it, they make it pink. Believe me, the pink color is not going to save the problem that we have. When we are working in development, the consequences of living a world built and thought around only men can be deadly. When we are designing a world to leave no one behind, we women need to be recognized. And these women, we are diverse. We are Afro-American, indigenous, disabled, working class. When we cross this information with disaggregated data, we found that approximately 60% of chronically hungry people are women and girls. In South Asia and Southeast Asia, from 45 to 60% of the women of reproductive age are underweight, and 80% of pregnant women have iron deficiencies. And we also know, thanks to FAO, that if women had the same access to productive resources as men, they could increase yields on their farms by 20 to 30%, and this could raise total agricultural output in developing countries by 2.5 to 4%, which in turn can reduce the number of hungry people in the world by 12 to 17%. Data now shows that women do a fair amount of farming. 79% of economically active women in the world in the least developed countries and 49% of economically active women in the world report agriculture as their primary economic activity. Nevertheless, many of the initiatives that we see exclude women by requiring a minimum land size, or that the person that attends the training is the head of the farming household or the only owner of the land. And we know that only 28% countries in the world, women and men, have the same rights to land. These conditions are all biased toward male farmers because women dominate the ranks of poor farmers. They dominate the rank of small-scale farmers, and they overwhelmingly unlikely to own the land they farm. The only thing that we need to do is to speak with some women. When I used to work with my biologist friends, I asked them, how many of you go into the forest and count only male jaguars? And they said, that is really stupid. And I said, yes, why do you do it with human population then? In the diverse to solve the silences in the data and make women visible, there has been a tendency to see women as vulnerable and unprotected. There must be a paradigm shift from perceiving women as victims to instead viewing them as powerful agents of change. Tackling land degradation and desertification demands that policymakers and practitioners review commitments to sustainable development, at the heart of which is and must continue to be advancing gender equality and women empowerment, and realizing women's rights as a prerequisite for sustainable development. Women and women organizations and networks around the world are already seeing this opportunity, and we are mobilizing action. Leaders at all levels are inspiring solutions by influencing policy shifts from global to local level, innovating new strategies, and developing new local technologies to build their families and their community resilience. Women around the world, we have already demonstrated that we're leading the way, from cooperative seed banks to early warning networks, from solar engineers to women politicians carrying a path to sustainable policy. Solutions exist, but it takes the whole of the global population to find them and act on them. The gender gap is not generally malicious or even deliberated. It is merely the product of a way of thinking that has been around for centuries, and therefore it is kind of a not thinking. It cannot be solved just by adding a sentence in the project that states that gender considerations will be taken into consideration throughout the project. This is as useless as making the tools that I refer in pink. It requires a change in thinking and designing our policies, initiatives, and projects. We cannot leave out 3.9 billion solutions when it comes to protect our land. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Costa Rica. I will allow the next panelist before I allow one or two questions. I now would like to introduce Ambassador His Excellency Howard Bamsey, the Chair of the Steering Committee of the Global Water Partnership. Ambassador Howard Ramsey, the Chair of the Water Partnership, and Honorary Professor in the School of Regulation and Global Governance at the Australian National University. He was the Executive Director at the Green Climate Fund from January 2017 until July 2018. Previously, he was Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute for a year until early 2014. The ambassador served as Special Advisor on Sustainable Development to the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and also as Special Advisor on Green Growth to Australian Aid. Ambassador Ramsey, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Minister. The very useful background document that the Secretariat provided us for this dialogue makes very clear that we cannot have a healthy land and healthy people unless we have healthy water. I've been asked to focus on that for a few minutes, on the water question, the water element in the hope for healthy land and healthy people. And I think that really it's a question of vulnerability. Vulnerability of water systems and of the people who depend on them. Well, what's happening then across the globe on water? Perhaps the best place to go to look for that is the review of SDG 6, the water goal, that was completed by the UN a couple of years ago, and which shows that we are not on track to realise SDG 6. And to repeat, if we don't do that, then we cannot bring about healthy land for healthy people. And the two main challenges to our reaching the goal are population growth and climate change. The strategy that has just recently been adopted by the Global Water Partnership, GWP, and that we will launch tomorrow, underlines the urgency, the increasing urgency of the response to population growth and climate change if we are to provide the water security that SDG 6 requires us to. The pressure of population growth on water systems is inexorable. That's a long-term, steady pressure that we can plan to deal with. The pressure from climate change is a mix. There is a long-term loss of water security as a result of the steady impacts of climate change, but climate change also, as we know, presents extreme events, and those events we've seen recently in drought and flood, in cyclones, in storm surges, and we experience the long-term degradation and desertification that come from climate change. All of these pressures cause water systems around the world to be vulnerable, to become more vulnerable, and the people who depend on them, especially the poorest, and as the Minister said, particularly women, suffer the most impact from these pressures. This is a grim picture. It's not one that we can be satisfied with. So what can we do about it? I think the background paper for our discussion says that all of these extreme events are a stress test for water systems. I think that the question of what we can do to improve matters is a stress test for water governance. We have lots of experts in this room who could tell us what measures we need to take to reduce the vulnerability of water systems, to reduce the vulnerability of people who depend on them, to improve water security. But it's poor governance that gets in the way of our taking those measures. In GWP, over 20 years of experience, we've come to understand that the best way to approach water governance is to understand it as part of an integrated system, that we cannot deal with one water issue as a discrete or separate, isolated activity. Invariably, any problem with water spreads out beyond that problem to the communities who depend on the water, to those who share the resource, to the industries that require it for development. Indeed, any water issue will have a multitude of stakeholders. And in GWP, our approach is to make sure that all of those stakeholders are at the table when decision-making is done on the water problems. This brings together people who didn't know before they reached the table that they need one another. And when they realise that they can help one another and collaborate, this process typically brings about innovation, because suddenly this isolated problem is seen as actually cross-sectoral, and it's much more effective then to take action to mobilise all of the sectors involved and to catalyse remedial action and proper preparation. Our approach we have found to be not always successful, but an approach which will be robust in dealing with the individual problems and helping guard against systemic problems as we deal with these challenges to healthy water. I believe if we continue to take that approach, and GWP has 3,000 partners partner organisations around the world, which gives us the capacity to provide assistance to those who are dealing with the pressures on water systems. If we continue to take that approach, then we can contain the vulnerability of water systems to the pressures of population growth and climate change and all of the manifestations of those pressures, and so help to guard public health in the interests of a healthy land and healthy people. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We will now move to other speakers. So we will skip the part we talked about, the questions. Perhaps if time will allow us towards the end, we will allow a few points of clarification to the speakers. But we move on to the other speakers. I will start with FAO. Mr. Rene Castro, the Assistant Director General of FAO. Mr. Castro, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and dear colleagues, excellencies. Following the same idea of Ambassador Howard Bansi about if there is no clean soils, if there are no healthy soils, there are no healthy diets and no healthy women and no healthy people. For us, soil pollution is becoming an anthropogenic and widespread problem with direct impact on food quality and safety. About a year ago, FAO hosted in the headquarters the Global Symposium on Soil Pollution, together with the Global Soil Partnerships, the Intergovernmental Technical Panel on Soils, and the Secretariats of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, and UN Environment and WHO. FAO coordinated the voluntary guidelines for sustainable soil management produced in an inclusive and participatory process that involved multiple stakeholders, including academic, national and research institutions, international organizations, NGOs, civil society, and the private sector, who contributed with scientific knowledge and experience on how soils should be sustainably managed for properly delivering ecosystem services while halting degradation. Now, we do have the voluntary guidelines in place. It's time to disseminate them, to get them to be implemented, but they are a reality today. FAO is committed to work with countries on actions and decisions to prevent and reduce soil pollution for increased food safety, security and nutrition, and naturally, ecosystem services, and promote the restoration of polluted sites. Pollutants can enter soils from a wide range of sources, including, among other means, agricultural inputs, atmospheric deposition, flood and irrigation water, accidental spills, inappropriate solid, liquid, and hazardous waste disposal, and industrial activities. Soil pollution is insidiously hazardous and is not always directly observable in the field, and in many cases cannot be detected and assessed on time. Negative consequences may embrace plant toxicities and subsequent productivity declines, contamination of water and off-site areas through sediment transport, and increased human and animal health risk due to the accumulation of contaminants in the food chain. Mr. Chairman, gentlemen, now we have the VGSSM, the voluntary guidelines. I invite you to get to know them, to implement them, and produce a world with less soil pollution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, FAO. I now proceed to call upon Finland. Her Excellency, the Deputy Minister, Mrs. Elina Kaku, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Our theme this morning, Healthy Land, Healthy People, is all about Agenda 2030. I think it is a prime example of how closely the 17 SDGs are interlinked and how success in one brings success in other SDGs as well. There is indeed an excellent background paper produced by the UNCCD Secretariat on these themes. Others have already referred to it. Implementing of Target 15.3 on halting land degradation is directly linked to SDG 3 and to SDG 2 as well, on ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all at all ages, and also in ending hunger. I think at the core is the fact that food security and healthy, diverse diet have a major impact on human health. The quality and quantity of food production greatly depends on the health of soil. Cooperation is one key point. No single ministry or sector can do this alone. Cooperation between different sectors, for example, health, agriculture, and forestry, as well as community administration and services, and private sector is indispensable. Thinking and operating in silos is a problem which should and can be overcome. Another key point is awareness and capacity. It is important to build awareness among people, including consumers alike. Behavioral changes to improve health have already taken place. A very good example is the dramatic decrease in tobacco consumption after systematic efforts in the European Union in regulation and awareness raising. I think another bit more recent change is made by consumers who support sustainable production of food through the mere choices they make. Awareness, capacity, and resilience of the whole society and health systems are needed to address current and emerging desertification, land degradation, and drought risks. It will save lives and money now and also in the future. Finally, a different example, Mr. Chair. In my own country, Finland, forests and their sustainable management are a major source of well-being, actually. Forests provide a wide range of opportunities for income, employment, and business. But forests, like parks or anything green in cities, also provide true benefits for both physical health and mental well-being. They are important settings for green care, generating wider benefits in terms of health and happiness. There's actually scientific research done which shows, at least in my country, that simply being in woods and forests for outdoor activities, for a walk, improve measurably the way people feel about their health and well-being. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Finland. I noticed that we are all managing our time very well, which is very good. I would like now to call upon Her Excellency the Minister, Mrs. Makoso Magiline Sochu from South Africa. South Africa, you have the floor.
Chairperson, we apologize. The minister has just stepped out to a bilateral meeting, so we'll pass this gap for us. If there's a chance to do it at a later stage, we'll take it up. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next delegation, Uzbekistan. You have the floor. Is Uzbekistan around? It appears maybe they are not around. We move on to the next delegation. Nigeria, you have the floor.
Who said we were going to speak? We didn't ask to speak.
It appears Nigeria is not ready. They are saying they did not ask, but they appear on the list. Maybe there should be some communication problem. So we move on to Algeria. Algeria, you have the floor. It appears Algeria, they are also not here. Senegal, you have the floor. It appears Senegal are not around. If any of these delegations happen to come back very soon, we will be able to find them into the program. I move on to the next delegation, Kenya. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Our apologies. Dr. Mohammed is not able to take up now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kenya. We move on to the IUCN. The IUCN, you have the floor. it appears IUCN also may have stepped out. So we'll move on to the next. To the next delegation, we have Mrs. Kalyani Shah from the Socio-Economic Welfare Action for Women and Children from Nepal. Nepal, you have the floor. Okay, I am guided that she's in the back, but there's no access to the microphone. I can see a hand there waving. What does that mean?
She's from Nepal, but she's in the back, not from the country of Nepal, but from the women's organization.
Okay.
So
Not from Nepal. I'm guided that this Ms. Kalyani is not from Nepal, but from the Women and Children. Is that the position?
correct.
Okay. You have the floor. It appears, I can see a hand at the back, but I cannot understand what exactly that hand is all about.
You can ask the secretary to go and check.
Can somebody from the secretariat please go and check why that gentleman is raising the hand?
And the microphone. He
Or maybe the microphone, he doesn't have the microphone. Maybe he needs some access to some microphone.
Exactly.
Or the mic is not working. Well, they can come and speak from here. Those of you who have microphone challenges, you are free to come and speak from here. In the interim, while those who have no access to microphones are trying to find their way to here, I will call upon India. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for providing me this opportunity. Mr. Chair, healthy land is an essential part of our life support system. Degradation and desertification processes rob the land of its ability to provide valuable services to humanity while driving biodiversity loss and climate change. India's population is expected to increase between now and 2050, as per the UN World Population Prospects 2019. To meet the food demand of the increasing population, cereal production must rise. Given that the supply of agricultural land is not going to rise, there is an immense pressure on existing cultivable land to meet the food needs of the population. Soil health and fertility is the basis for sustainable profitability of the farmers. Mr. Chair, in healthy soils, crop residue get transformed by earthworms and other soil fauna into soft and spongy organic matter, what we call humus, or organic carbon. This soaks up water, creates an environment where soil fauna like earthworms thrive and binds the soil's three constituents: sand, silt, and clay. Without humus, Mr. Chair, the soil gets compressed and hardened, making them degraded and deficient of nutrients. India has documented its sustainable land and ecosystem management practices in the form of SLEM SLAM book published in 2014. Mr. Chair, from behavioral changes, communications approaches successfully used in the health sector. Communications that motivate the community involvement is important for us. Over the years, India has been many behavioral changes, initiatives introduced. The Swachh Bharat mission was one of such much publicized project. The story is the same with many other behavioral changes initiatives in country like India. Mr. Chair, to cater to the problem of soil health, India has initiated many schemes. Some of the examples I would like to quote is using optimal doses of fertilizers and cropping pattern as per the scientific recommendations is the first step towards sustainable farming. In 2015, India introduced soil health card, adding great values to the farmers' action. The next is in July 2019, this year only, to further give a boost to the soil health, India announced a proposal of zero budget natural farming. Zero budget farming is a set of farming methods that involve zero credit for agriculture and no use of chemical fertilizers. Mr. Chair, gender data needs to be mainstreamed in land management. India has undertaken several initiatives in this respect. In India, the Ministry of Women and Child Development is the nodal agency for coordination of gender budgeting activities, including preparation of strategic framework of activities that is then disseminated across various ministries and departments. India emphasizes upon the importance of gender as a cross-cutting theme across several development policies and programs, and it is feasible to identify budget components and budget shares that are more closely associated with specific gender aims to bridge inequality in India. In our country, prominent schemes such as the National Health Mission, National Rural Livelihood Mission, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act are some of the examples where considerable resource allocations can be ascertained from a gender perspective. A successful example in India of gender budgeting is from energy infrastructure sector, the scheme or yojana called Ujjwala. It has shown immense impact on the health and social status of BPL, below poverty line women especially, for providing them cooking gas connections. Mr. Chair, India appreciates the UN Women's effort in partnership with the IUCN and UNCCD towards developing the manual to support the integration of gender equality in Andean project development and welcomes its launch at COP14. India agrees to UNCCD's Gender Action Plan as a good starting point for actions to mainstream gender into LDN TSP and LDN TPP and integration of gap indicators in UNCCD reporting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, India. We have an indication from civil society. Civil society, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, distinguished delegates, colleagues. My name is Kalyani Shah, President of Socio-Economic Welfare Action for Women and Children from Nepal. Thank you for providing me with this opportunity to speak on behalf of more than 500 CSOs accredited to the UNCCD that are actively involved in the implementation of the convention together with people and grassroots communities. We all here have one goal, that is overcoming the land degradation issues and sustainable use of land for the prosperous future of humankind as well as Mother Earth. Our nature has its own laws that maintain the balance and harmony of everything that is alive together. We humans have violated the laws of nature, resulting in imbalances and destruction of the quality of land. To add to human interference, climate change too is putting more stress on the land and on people who depend directly and indirectly on the land. Mr. President, when we think of Mother Nature, all life forms should be held in high esteem. Healthy nature leads to more diversity. Further diversity leads to a healthier environment, land. This is how Mother Nature has designed her system. We are all dependent on this system. We must not alter this system. We must care of this creation. We all are well aware that how nature-friendly the traditional and indigenous knowledge and practices are. But in the name of the development, in the name of economic growth and GDP, we are destroying these traditional practices and indigenous knowledge. With regard to this, civil society organizations strongly demands policymakers to make decisions to conservation of the nature resources like ponds, wetlands, rivulets at the local level and encourage a local food consumption habit that can maintain the soil health. We strongly urge to conserve, document and replicate the nature-friendly traditional practices of the indigenous people. Mr. President, our land needs care and nourishment, and no one can better nourish and care than a mother, a woman. Here we have to acknowledge the role of women for maintaining the health of land, and we need to ensure women's rights on land in order for sustainable management of soil health. Land is losing its capacity to support the life due to our uniform habits. Dear friends, we have to nourish our land with healthy organic matter instead of chemicals. We do not own the land. We only borrow it from our children. In order to give our future generations healthy land, our present generation must live responsibly. We demand legally binding strong agreement between countries to maintain the health of their lands. This legally binding agreement must reward the country for best practices and penalize the country for degradation or destruction of their land. We would also like to suggest that all countries promote agroecology instead of high-intensive chemical farming. This is our own planet. There is no other to go to. Act now. And the last, but not the least, we would like to have a real interactive dialogue and to interact with speakers and not only presentations of the statements. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, CSO. I now call upon IGO. IGO, you have the floor. IGO.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. أنا أمثل
I represent the Arab Center Aqsad, which is one of the organizations under the League of Arab States. I understood during the earlier meeting, I heard about the link between the spiritual and the material, and that reminded me of the two Qurans. The corruption has reached the seas and the land at the hands of men, and we are now suffering what's been man-made. Let's hope that we will see things more clearly. Desertification, Mr. Chairman, and soil degradation, aren't they also a form of corruption which has emerged from the man-made causes through practices that have damaged the ecological systems, the ecosystems, environment, as well as human health? We have tasted the bitter fruit of such behavior, and therefore we call upon rational use of these resources and for rehabilitation of the resources that have been affected. And so we have started to go back to reason. This return was achieved through the convention itself that has been signed by so many countries. I was happy to hear many speakers make the link between the health of our land and human health itself, and I confirm that it is important to respect this balance, this equation, by conserving the environment, by conserving resources on the basis of a major principle, which is that land does not belong to us. It has been lent to us by future generations, and we will need to hand over this land in an integral manner. So for their health, thank you.
Thank you, IGO. I now call upon Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. This is an extremely crucial matter. A healthy planet will mean a healthy people, and we want to highlight this aspect. It's not something that should only be spoken about in these fora, but our countries, our peoples, we must understand that everything takes place on the land and has a direct repercussion on the quality of life of people. And this has a great deal to do with poverty. Nearly all of our countries have legislation. We have rule of law. We have laws and rules on how to deal with land. But the problem is that these are not always respected. And why not? Because there is pressure on all of the productive sectors, and I think that this lies at the heart of the problem. We need to be responsible. We need to know that we are losing vast quantities, tons, every year of our land, which will halt our canals, our rivers, our dams, and providing sedimentary land. This is meaning that we are going to lose our natural capital, which is land. This is a theme that needs to be discussed in a holistic manner. When we look at land planning, that's one of the issues. What do we do when we look at the hydrological needs? We must respect the characteristics of our land, the valleys for production. And as other delegations have said, we're only speaking about the production and economic growth, and we are missing the idea of the future of our planet. We need to have this at the heart of our plans. We need to be much more responsible. The use of land without considering the balance is the reason for poverty, the lack of involvement of the stakeholders who can assist us to take decisions that will assist our governments. Everything relates to the land, everything relates to this, and relates to decisions made by municipalities, both technical decisions as well as political decisions. The great achievement will be if we are able to harmonize this technical and scientific knowledge with the political decisions that we need to take. However, we are nervous about this. I believe that it is time now. We are the last generation, it's said, to take such decisions. I believe that that means that we should think about these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have managed our time well. We have about 12 minutes. And like I said, that I will allow just a few questions, basically points of clarifications concerning issues which have been raised by the panelists as well as by the other delegations at this high-level dialogue. Are there any delegations with some points of clarifications on the presentations by the panelists or any other speakers who have spoken in this dialogue? I can't see any hand. I can't see any hand. I think. Hello? They can put their requests here. They can put their. They know how to. Yes. Those of you who have any points of clarification, you can put up your hand, but your hand is through just the system. You don't necessarily have to raise your hand, but you indicate through the system. Yes, I see that the Philippines request to speak. Yes, Philippines, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. Chair, according to some water advocates, water is the lifeblood of agriculture and soil is the heart of it. So if clean water without pollution and toxic elements flows into its heart, our soil, we are expecting healthy soil that will produce healthy food for human consumption. And so I believe that soil health and water health should be discussed altogether as agenda for action to achieve healthy land for healthy people. We recognize that there is the Global Water Partnership working on water-related issues and the Global Soil Partnership working on the issue on soil that aim to preserve and increase soil health and stop and reverse soil degradation through its 5 pillars of action. In this regard, I'm looking forward that the Global Water Partnership and the Global Soil Partnership should work together toward achieving a truly healthy land for healthy people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Philippines. Any other comment? Question, point of clarification? If there are not any, I would like to, first of all, before I thank you for your participation in this high-level dialogue on healthy land, healthy people, I would like just to mention that we have taken note of the various issues which have been raised by various speakers, but I do take note of some highlights, especially the issues that have been raised passionately, the issues of gender data, the need to have comprehensive data and integrate this data in our planning, and also recognizing the fact that we need to step up our efforts towards gender equality. The issue of vulnerability of the water systems has been raised, especially the issue of water security. That's an issue that needs to be taken care of in our planning, as well as the challenges of contamination of the environment, especially in the food chain, and also the issue of nutrition security. The importance of sustainable use of our resources has been emphasized. There has been a passionate plea towards the management, sustainable management of our environment, particularly land. And an expression was made that really we are, those of us who are alive today, we are only temporary custodians of this land, that we have to pass on this land in a manner perhaps even better than we found it to the next generations. This was really a passionate plea that we have a responsibility to the future generations. The issue of political and municipalities' decisions, the the decisions made by municipal councils, for instance, in the allocation and use of this land, and the political decisions really have to be well informed and integrated in land planning, because these it's the decisions from municipal councils, it's the decisions from politicians, which perhaps will positively impact upon how land is going to be used. So these issues have been highlighted as being very important in terms of the way we plan our land use. Yes, there has been a call, for instance, that the water movement, the land movement, these movements should be harmonized so that those who are working in the water sector, those who are working in the land sector, these efforts should go hand in hand because of the close relationship between water and land. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for your participation, and I would like to say that these are just a few of the things that stood out as I listened to the various speakers. But we are reconvening at 16:30 hours today to conclude our high-level dialogue, and at this closing ceremony, that's when we are going to give the full report of what has been highlighted and what has been recommended by the various speakers. I thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.